Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Brandon Anderson, NBA futures analyst. This is your Western Conference semifinals, Denver Nuggets versus Minnesota Timberwolves series preview. I'm not going to say this is the NBA finals. I'm not going to say this is the Western Conference finals, but lordy, this is a huge series for both teams, for future plays across the board. This is going to be a heck of a series if everybody stays healthy. We'll tell you about it. We'll give you best bets. We'll break it all down on today's show. As a reminder, make sure you download the Action Network app. You can catch, as you listen to this, you should be able to find my playoff storylines and analysis on the nights that have come and gone this week, setting you up for the game sixes, some trends in there, different stuff in there as well. I will have a gamer or two, possibly, off of Wolves Nuggets game 1 on Saturday night. You can catch all that. You can also track Brandon's picks. All of the picks that he plays are in the Action Network app, as well as his NFL stuff. So you're going to want to check it out. Go to youtube.com/the Action Network. We're bringing back Buckets Live. Going to be probably Sunday. Might be Friday. I might do it Friday. If not Friday, then Sunday. And you can check all that out over at youtube.com/the Action Network. All right, Brandon Anderson. The Minnesota Timberwolves, the 3 seed, take on the defending champion Denver Nuggets. The Wolves dispatch the Phoenix Suns in 4. The Nuggets, it's been interesting in Denver, the perceptions of the series versus the Lakers, because it took such heroics, because so many games were close, because they were down double digits. There are two competing series of thought here in Denver, which is one is like, hey, they're going to need to play a lot better because they didn't play great versus the Lakers. I know they won in 5, but this is a little bit like, this is a whole other level of class, and they have not played well. They got to play better than they did. And the other side being like, they won in 5. Everything's fine. The gentleman's sweep. No big deal. The Denver Nuggets are minus 190 versus the Wolves plus 155 on the series price line at BetMGM. The spread, Denver minus 1.5. So that's Denver in 6 or less at plus 100, which is a very interesting price. Minnesota plus 1.5 at minus 125. So that's Minnesota to make it to a game 7 or win at minus 125. Game 1 is Saturday night. Game 2 is Monday. And then they have a 3-day break, 4 days in between games until they play again on Friday because they got done so early and Clippers Mavericks is going to go long. We will do best bets and then we'll break all this stuff down. First, let me ask you, how excited are you to watch the series? Like, how much are you looking from a basketball perspective? How excited are you for this?
I'm stoked. I'm super excited for this series, and I'll just say up front, I will cop to it. I have been the Timberwolves doubter. As the fan of my own team, I know I have not been on buckets much throughout the season, so only you know this, not most of our listeners. But I have been dumping on and doubting on this team, both their chances to make a run in the playoffs and to actually hold up in a Denver series. And if I'm being honest and fair to myself, even just how fun the team was and how much I wanted to believe in them as a fan. And doggone, I think Ant won me over. As a fan, I'm here for it. And as I dug into the series today for like 4 hours prepping, trying to find some edge somewhere, I was like, man, this is a good series, and this is a good clash of styles. I was having some tweets back and forth earlier about how homogenous a lot of basketball has become. Frankly, look, we're recording this right as Clippers and Mavericks got done, and holy homogenous. Just dribble, shoot. Did the shot go in? Cool, okay. What we learned from that game? Well, one team shot well. Okay, you won. Good job. This is not that series. This is like matchups and X's and O's and how we're going to defend this way. And I realize there's that in a lot of ways. Most games are going to have that sort of stuff. Maybe it's just that stuff's a little easier for me to see here in the distinct styles and the physicality clash to what Denver brings. There's a lot here. I got super excited digging into it. I distilled my notes down for this podcast to 750 words of notes. So yeah, we got a lot to say. I'm excited to watch. I I told you, I'll own it right now because it's not my pick. I said several times this year, Nuggets sweep. We're never getting the series, but if we get the series, Nuggets sweep. Get out of here. Denver is going to get rid of these guys. They've heard all year how close the series was. Oh, it's the toughest team. We're trying to avoid them. And like the narrative fan in me just wanted to be like, come on, it's the champs. They're going to have heard all that news and be like, get them out of here. Get them out of here. We didn't need to try against the Lakers. We're trying against this team because we have a point to prove. Get these boys out of here. And boy, if that's what happens now, I'm feel so dumb that I just like dismissed all of that feeling the whole year. I just don't think that's what's happening. I think we're going long. I think, quite frankly, as a slight spoiler alert to where we're headed, I think Denver is real lucky that they got home court in this series
Yeah.
and have the home court advantage because I think every little edge is going to matter, and I'm excited to talk it through with you.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fantastic series. I will say this, that Denver is not annoyed at the concept that the Wolves are right there. They are very much aware. Now, that might result in the Wolves getting their absolute best game. And
Right.
when Denver gives that, they're extremely tough to beat, especially in the altitude at home. And
Yep.
that's tough. But if the Wolves bring it, the Nuggets are expecting a tough series, and I'm expecting a tough series, and we'll see kind of where it goes. A lot of storylines in this one. This is S tier superstar and Jokic, A tier superstar and Anthony Edwards. Supporting casts are A level. The coaching matchup is A level. Borderline S tier based off of how good I think Chris Finch and Michael Malone are. They're both excellent at making adjustments. Uh, all of this is, I mean, it's going to take like little edges are going to be extremely important in the series. And not even necessarily in terms of saying that every game's going to be close, but if the Nuggets bench wins the non-Jokic minutes by a +3, that could result in a blowout rather than it being close at the end, just
Yep.
because of how game flow goes. On the other hand, Wolves can absolutely build a lead that the Nuggets can't come back from, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. In those minutes and carry that through. It's just the game flow, all of it's going to be great. But let's do the bets. What are your best bets for Wolves Nuggets?
So my favorite bet here, and I really like this one too. I think this is badly mispriced. I'll explain why later. My favorite bet is Jamal Murray, hero of round one, to lead the series in assists, +900. Now, just to be very clear, normally if I take a long odds like that, that's maybe like I call it a sprinkle or a nibble, and that's maybe a half unit or a quarter unit. This is a multi-unit play for me. This is probably going to end up being my favorite bet of the second round. Jamal Murray, assist leader, +900. But I felt like I had to give a pick on the series. So I dug and I spent like an extra hour finding, okay, what I have to own a side here. What is the pick? And I can't believe it, Matt Moore. My best bet on the series for a side is my Minnesota Timberwolves in 6 +550.
Ooh.
Just a lean on that one. This is a half unit pick. I'll explain it later.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for getting over the nihilism. This team's good enough to warrant it. The organization can still be a dumpster fire, but the locker room and coaching staff is really good. My best bet is Nuggets -1.5 at +100. I wanted to be on Wolves. I want to be on, like, I want to be on Wolves. Like, that's where I want to be. I love this team. I love this team. I love how they match up with Denver. Like, this Wolves team has been the most fun, the second most fun. Thunder's probably the most fun, second most fun team this year. And they've won so many big games. I want such good things for them. I want good things for their fans, but I tend to go too far with thinking that competitive means victory, and those are two different things. So I'm doing Wolves -1.5. I will also have a small play, a nibble, if you will, a sprinkle on Wolves game one Nuggets series, which you can get a pretty hefty price on that, +475 or better in the market. I also will be on Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Mike Conley, a half bet on both to lead the series in 3-point makes.
I
Those
like
are
that.
those are also going to be my plays. All right. Let's get into it. So we put together a rundown, and by we I mean you. A lot of your 700 words of notes. Was last year's playoff series actually that close? Was a question that you had in here, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's that's been the story all year. That's been the thing that I've been reacting to you as we've texted about this possibility all year. That to me, like you mentioned, will Denver bring their A game? Will they be locked in? And I still think there's a possibility that, like, I'm not sure. Denver doesn't really strike me. Jokic doesn't strike me as the guy that's like watching ESPN and like eating up all the storylines and the Stephen A. Smiths and everything. That doesn't seem like their thing. Like
Right.
we need something up on, we need bulletin board material. I don't know. Maybe that's just athletes in every team, but that's been the story all year. Is this is the team they pushed them. They were the team that gave Minnesota or gave Denver the toughest push last year. They're the team that Denver has been trying to, if they could, avoid them in the bracket. And I think there's, after doing the matchup stuff, I think that there's merit to that. I think like they're a tough matchup. There are some real issues here that sure it logically makes sense to would have liked to have somebody else take care of this team for you. I don't think just looking back at the bracket, frankly, they played last year. The Nuggets won the first three games. They led most of the way. Timberwolves won the fourth game. They gave it the old gentleman's sweep. They gave it the Lakers series we just watched is what happened, except the games weren't as close as the Lakers series. The next series, Nuggets played the Suns, and it was 2-2. Like game five, that was a big spot for me. That was a spot when I went in on Denver, but it was 2-2 at that time. Devin Booker was shooting like 8,000%, couldn't miss anything. And then they kind of got some injuries, and Denver got through the series. I think Denver would have got through either way. But to me, that was a bigger push for them. I'm curious what you think to my analysis on the bulletin board material thing, because to me, that's part of why all year long I was ready to just be like, Denver will take them seriously and Denver's better. So Denver will be ready and knock them out based on this last year close thing. What do you make of all that?
So a couple things. I think one, I think you were exposed to me too much. Like it's an over-indexing thing. Like
That's fair.
the story from last year was not like, oh, this is a really close series. It was like, oh, the Minnesota Timberwolves, like Karl Anthony Towns got back and like, oh, they made the playoffs, but they just couldn't match up with Denver and they're not very good. And the Rudy Gobert trade's a disaster. Like that's the narrative, right? And that was what was really funny is like people were still killing them over the summer for all these trades or for the Rudy trade. And meanwhile, Denver was like very quietly like that team's a real pain in the ass. And so I will say Jokic does not watch ESPN. Like I'll just tell you, he's not watching ESPN. He does not care about bulletin board material. He'll hear stuff when it's brought to him in the locker room. If somebody like that, a very important thing in this series is going to be Rudy Gobert keeping his fucking mouth shut for the Wolves because if he yaps, that's going to get to Jokic, and then Jokic will I have 47 brother him. The rest of the Nuggets are susceptible to that kind of talk of the they are very much susceptible to the nobody believes in us stuff, but I think there is enough still reticence towards Minnesota, and there is still enough respect for Denver. Like everyone all year has kind of acknowledged Denver as the best team. Even across Boston, even with Boston's record, that there's been like the champs are still the champs feel. And I don't think that Denver's necessarily comfortable with that. And I'll say this, I think they have a hard time like finding the gear.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things I'm really interested about game one. If they come out and they have the gear from game one, they're gonna absolutely like I'm gonna bet Wolves in game one and they're gonna obliterate that bet. Like I'll just tell you right now, if you think you're getting a fastball from Denver, you need to bet them because their fastball is better than Minnesota's. This is not like my confidence in Minnesota to make this a series is not based on best versus best. It is largely predicated on I do not think Denver has shown the ability as consistently this year to find that. And that
Mhm.
I think really matters. You got the regular season matchups this year, 2-2. A lot of messiness. A
Yep.
lot of weirdness, and that's to be expected. That's what kind of always happens. I will say, you can throw out two, like one of the Wolves losses, there was no Rudy and no Cat.
Yeah,
The
and no
second,
Nas.
yeah,
All three big guys
all
out.
three, all three bigs out. Um, in the other one, it was Towns was out, and so
Yeah.
they were
Two
short.
other ones. Towns was out.
Yeah,
Towns missed the last three, and I think Jamal missed one of those three also.
yeah. And so that's the thing is like, and this is what always happens when I try and bring up this stuff on Twitter is people are like, well, no, this he was out, or they were out back to back, or blah blah blah. And I'm just kind of like, I don't really care about the outcome. I care about the game flow and like what
Yeah.
from the moments that we had meaningful stuff, what did that look like? And I will just tell you, like the overall stuff is like, oh, they were 2-2. So like this is like, a dead even series. And then if you like look at the numbers, you're like, I don't know how much of a dead even series this was because it sure looks like the Wolves kicked their ass a little bit because
Yeah.
that's like a little bit more of what it kind of showed. Jokic had a minus 5.2 net rating in this series, in the season series. They lost the Jokic minutes by 5 points per 100 possessions.
Is that
That
a thing
never
that happens with Nikola Jokic a lot? Does he lose a lot of minutes by 5?
ever, never happens. And so, real like just like a really fascinating kind of twist there. They lost the off court by 5.2, and even worse, the Zeke Naji and DeAndre Jordan minutes were absolutely just nightmarishly excessively, even for them, bad in this in that season series. There's a lot of matchup stuff to talk about, but I will just say that like I'm not trying to over index. I'm not trying to selection bias this. I am saying that the games the Minnesota Timberwolves won were games where I felt it was more indicative of the matchup at full strength. Nuggets
Mhm.
fans will disagree with that, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I think that that's true. Really, the only full strength game that we got was the first one, and that was one of the games that Minnesota won pretty handily. I think all but one of the four matchups, one team was up almost 20 at halftime, and then it just kind of coasted from there. And two of those were two of the Minnesota wins. So yeah, I think I largely agree with most of those conclusions. A few of the things I noticed, just as kind of, I don't know that I'm going to hang my hat on it. And boy, did I learn not to over-index on regular season matchup. Timberwolves last round, that didn't go well for me. But a few things I noticed from the matchups when Minnesota won, two things happened in both games that the Timberwolves won. Number one, they got to the line a lot. They had
Mm.
27 free throws and 37 free throws. And the thing in this series because Minnesota gets to the line a lot and Denver does tend to foul a decent amount. So I think that's going to be an important thing to watch. Denver also shot 18% on threes and 29% on threes in those games. Again, that's not a thing. We saw that happen in the Lakers series. We've seen them not hit their threes sometimes. Michael Porter Jr. was incredible. They needed him to be incredible. They need him to hit those threes. And I think we're gonna live inside the arc mostly in this series compared to modern NBA basketball. But when Denver gets those threes, they got to hit some of them. And the games where they couldn't hit them, and then Minnesota got the easy stuff at the line, that's where they won. So that was one thing. Nuggets starting point guard. So obviously that's Jamal Murray, except one game was Reggie Jackson. I noticed they just had a really tough time scoring inside the arc. So adding in the Reggie Jackson game, 14 of 40 on 2-pointers, 35%. That's Minnesota basketball. That is Minnesota dictating the way they want to play, which is we're bigger than you. And go ahead and get to the rim if you want a little bit because you're not going to be able to finish over all of our length and defense in there. That's what Minnesota wants to do. And again, I think that fits with what you said. The last thing, and I'm curious what you think about this because I don't want to over-index on the series. To me, the big takeaway is that consistently, no matter who was playing, no matter who was missing for Minnesota or not, Minnesota seemed to have a clear strategy of turning Nikola Jokic into a scorer and not a passer. He scored 25 or more all four games, scored 41 one of the games. Here's his assist numbers per game in the season series: 3 assists, 2, 5, and 7.
Yep.
He averaged 4.3 assists per game. And Jamal Murray, or Reggie Jackson, the one game, averaged 8.3. It was a big difference, and that is a huge swing from the rest of the season. To me, those numbers say, go ahead, Nikola, you want to score? I know you're not wired to want to score, so you do your thing and score, buddy. But the way we're defending you is going to take away all those twos that come so easily, and we're going to let Jamal Murray try to beat us rather than Jokic. That's a big thing in the series. Obviously, a spoiler alert is where it's going to come into why I like Jamal to lead the series in assists later on. But what do you make of that? The Jokic being a scorer and not a passer thing is that a thing? Is that a regular season thing that I shouldn't think too much of, or is that a thing that you expect from this matchup?
So I think as a baseline strategy, yes, they will prefer it. In part because the Wolves have a pretty healthy shot balance. They don't over-index inside the arc. They do have a good balance. So they try and get to the line, they try and get to the rim, and they try and hit from three. And Ant fills in the rest with mid-range stuff. They have a pretty healthy balance. And so you mentioned the shooting numbers. That's going to affect those Jokic assist figures as well. We saw this in the Lakers series where they would send the double pretty quickly in the post and then anticipate. This is one of the things with the post ups for Nikola is he's done them enough and teams have played Denver enough. If you watch that Lakers series and you remember LeBron sniping off those corner passes and taking them the other direction for dunks, a lot of that was built off of the Lakers got used to how
Yeah,
to pre-rotate on doubles. So you call out, you're going for the double, and as soon as you see your guy start to go for the double, you are already moving to rotate, cover, and on the weak side especially, it's going into basically a matchup zone to be able to pick off those passes. And I will say this, the Wolves have the best matchup zone of any team in the league this season by my untrained eye via exposure. Like it is phenomenal. Their ability to recognize how and when to navigate space to take your angles away
yeah,
is magnificent. And they really fucked with Jokic using those dynamics to mess with the interiors and the kick out passes. And when you take those away, you do kind of leave him with, hey, if you want to score on Gobert, you can. They're aware that like that basically Jokic doesn't want that. And Finch is smart enough to do that. Now, you can't throw the same thing at him is the problem. Is if you throw the same thing at him and
yeah,
Malone, they will eventually. Now, I will to this degree, I will say this. If you keep leaving weak side shooters open early in shot clock and there's no movement and there's no cutting and it's just entry pass to Jokic, double, he kicks weak side and they miss, they will keep going to it. And what I mean by that is they are not going to do like, you know, how everyone gets frustrated when a team misses a bunch of threes and it's like, well, maybe you should switch it up. If you're in that situation, you can't because the Wolves are literally like, we have five guys in the paint. You are not cutting. No back cuts, no slip cuts, no split action, nothing. You get that shot. You get that wide open three early in the clock, one pass. If you want it, you got it. But if you miss those, now all of a sudden your offense is stagnant. They're getting stops and they're running. Transition is going to be huge in this series because Denver's going to push the pace. If the assist stuff for Jokic picks up, I think a lot of it's going to be in transition. It's because they're getting them in not even in pure fast break, but getting them into mid transition cross
yeah,
matches. When the Wolves get out of their assignments, they're mortal defensively. You can get past them in those situations. They'll make mistakes. And that's why getting buckets is going to be so pivotal for Minnesota bettors is you need buckets in order for you to set up the defense. Like
yeah,
that's always a thing. It's not as much with some teams. Some teams really can just like run off of mate. The Pacers do not, and you're like, well, the Pacers defense is terrible. It's not even so much that the Pacers literally have a better scoring average in the series versus Milwaukee off of makes than they do misses because the Bucks are like, we made it, we can jog back, and the Pacers are like down your throat. So in this one though, the Wolves need stop, bucket, stop, repeat. And that's like where they really want to live. Um, I think foul trouble obviously is a huge factor here. Gobert, like, I think Gobert makes him work. I just do. I think Gobert makes Jokic work. Now he scores over him. He just absolutely obliterates him one on one, and it's really frustrating for Rudy. And containing his emotions is a big deal in this series too. But Gobert makes him work, and that's all you can really do. And if Jokic is having to score 40, then the Wolves have a good chance of winning the series because the math is going to work out in their favor.
Yeah, I agree. I think fouls could be a story. Karl Anthony Towns loves to get in foul trouble. Last year in the playoff series, that was one takeaway I had from the series a year ago, as Towns just was terrible, terrible in that series. Like,
Yep.
he was real bad, and he lived in foul trouble, and he can't do it. He just picks up like 2-3 stupid fouls nearly every game. As a fan, it's infuriating to watch. The whole thing with Minnesota is that they have all these size issues that give Denver problems. Well, you got to have the size guys on the court to be able to do that. So Cat's got to find a way to stay enough out there. Gobert's got to find a way. I don't really see Denver necessarily getting a big free throws advantage, but if you can pick up a few fouls on those guys and mess up the rotations a little bit, I think that could be a story. Denver actually did win on the rebounding pretty consistently here, and I think they'll get some offensive rebounds, get some extra buckets that way. So that's one advantage they'll have on offense. But you know me, I dig into the four factors stuff. Denver's offense is really quite simple. If you try to do the four factors thing, it's called, we have Jokic, so we're going to win EFG. The end of story. We're going to get better shots than you're supposed to allow us to get. Well, Denver's EFG has not been quite elite this year. It has been good. It's been very good. You have Jokic. That's how it goes. Minnesota's effective field goal percentage defensively is number one. That's the thing that the Timberwolves are incredible at. So I think it's interesting because Denver doesn't really want to shoot a ton of threes anyway. Minnesota doesn't give many up. So I think, again, the threes are not going to be the big story here. The story is, and the matchup is, that Denver had made more twos than anyone in the NBA this year. That efficient percentage, seventh best, not quite elite, a little bit down from past years. Timberwolves are the number one 2-point percent defense. And I harp on twos because it's a lot more predictable and steady night after night than the 3-point variance. In the season series, Denver against Minnesota shot 51.9% on twos. It's not a great number. That's not a good number for Denver, not for their offense. They average for the season over 56% against the whole NBA. So under 52 against Minnesota, that's not a huge difference, but in a game, that's a difference of a few points. And in a series that we think is going to be really close, you might lose instead of winning that game there. Even if you notice in the wins, they not only made more percentage of their twos, they just got more of them. This is a thing that's happening in the Indiana series right now too. It's just, for Denver, you want more twos because that means that the cuts and the Jokic passing and the way their offense works best is creating more of the stuff that they're best at. You want them to have more twos and make more twos. And that is what Minnesota is built to stop. Look, last series, this is why I couldn't get on Minnesota's side, because the Suns didn't care about any of that crap. The Suns just want to shoot jumpers the whole time. So I was like, well, what? Minnesota's defense is wasted. What good is that? Minnesota's defense literally was built to stop Denver, like quite literally. For Tim Connolly, that's the name, right? Tim Connolly?
Yep. Tim Connolly.
Tim Connolly quite literally left Denver to go to Minnesota and was like, well, that team's real good. How do I stop them? I know. I will trade everything to get this other guy to be the defense in the middle. They built this incredible defense to stop Denver. Like, from that point of view, you better be able to hang in the series because you put everything into this. And I think they'd be able to before I started prepping, and I think that they can be able to do that. I talked in the previous round about teams that had an elite defense historically, but an average offense. The Timberwolves are pretty average offensively. Yep. Typically, those teams don't lose in the first round. They don't win the championship either. Usually, those teams win one or two series. And I look back today, when do they lose? Not even when do they lose? Who do they lose to? And consistently what I found, in fact, there's been 17 teams the last 3 decades that kind of fit my pattern of a 5 points or better defense compared to league average offense. Every single team, 15 out of 15 that lost to a top 7 offense. Every one of them, and over half lost to a top 3 offense. Denver ranked 5th on offense this year. Yeah. So my question then is, I think of Denver as a top 3 offense because that's what they're supposed to be, but they haven't quite been that version all the time. They're not that with the bench version. I don't know, like the version of Denver that we think of, their fastball, as you called it, I think is good enough. And in sports, in basketball and other sports, great offense beats great defense. That's how this usually goes. I'm not sure Denver's great offense is quite at the level of the greatness of Minnesota's defense. I think Minnesota's defense is more elite than Denver's offense is this year. And that was where I got to and was like, oh, okay, we have a series here. So I want to know from you. I, I'm not good at the X's and O's stuff. How do you feel like when the Nuggets have the ball in offense? How do you think Minnesota wants to match up when we have the presumed starting fives on the floor? Who's defending Jokic and what's Minnesota doing?
So I'm very curious to see how they approach the Jamal Murray question. I think they're going to start with Jaden McDaniels, and Jaden actually got lit up by Conley or by Jamal. Jamal ripped him pretty badly in this one. Murray was 11 of 17 with a 115 offensive rating versus McDaniels. He was 0 and 5. It was just 3 minutes, but he was 0 and 5 versus Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is going to play a ton in this series. He played a ton in last series. He's like the 16 gamer that's going to get a lot of run here. I don't think this is a Kyle Anderson series. I think this is a Nickeil Alexander-Walker series. NAW in particular gave Jamal real problems, and part of it, Jamal doesn't have great pace. Jamal's a really good, like Jamal's obviously, like you saw the 2 buzzer beaters, incredible shot maker, underrated as a playmaker, which Brandon will tell you about more later. Great range, deep bag, all of it. Doesn't have great pace. And so one of the problems is that if you get up into him and you really attack his dribble and you deny things like the dribble handoffs or screen action by getting over the screen and just being like, you're not screening me, tends to dribble a lot. And now you're into the clock. And now you haven't given it to Jokic, and you haven't run 13 motions off of Jokic. You haven't run 3 different DHOs. Clock's already down to 8 when Jokic touches the ball, makes a move, draws a double, kick out, miss, rebound. Like, that's a lot of what this is going to be. But the question is going to be like, does Finch pre-adjust and maybe put Ant on him to try and use the length, or does he not want Ant having to go over the screens every time? I don't think he'll probably do it. I think he'll probably keep Ant on Michael Porter Jr. to save his legs, but Ant's going to have to be really smart with staying home because MPJ is like the guy that will continuously knock down 45% threes. Like, he is the guy that is ready for all of those passes and will knock them down. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, his shooting numbers are good. They were not good in the round versus the Lakers. And there have been a lot of nights this year where anecdotally, not percentage-wise, anecdotally, I have been like, that was not a great shooting game from KCP. First team, he should be first team all defense. That's how good KCP's been this year. But offensively, hasn't been the absolute lights out shooter that he has been. Again, the numbers tell me differently, but that's like that's an eye test thing, and those are going to be leverage shots. I'm very big on this concept right now in the playoffs of leverage shots. KCP 3-pointers are going to be absolutely massive. If he misses those, the Wolves have an opportunity there. There will be the biggest thing about having the 2 bigs is that they will not get killed by the Aaron Gordon crashes as routinely. Yep. And the reason is some of that with what I talked about with that matchup zone on the weak side. You can have the other big just be like, we're not going to allow that underneath lob to Gordon. No little cut-ins, no little duck-ins from the dunker spot, no crashes from the weak side baseline cut. We're going to cut all that off. And the problem then is, well, okay, if you're doubling on that side and you have one guy low, that's 3 dudes, and you have 3 other players on the weak side, somebody's got to be open. But when you have Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you have the athleticism to make those rotations and recover, and the understanding of space so much better than other teams, particularly the Los Angeles Lakers, do when they're so bad with their perimeter defensive personnel. So if you want like the basic on this, it's simply the Wolves will be better at contesting weak side threes and making rotations without giving up the Gordon lob, because that's where so many teams get screwed. Is they can make the rotation to the weak side shooter, but then Gordon gets the lob. They can cut off, they can crash low and prevent Gordon from getting the lob dunk, but then the shooter's open. And
Yeah.
Jokic is so good at not only making that read, but redirecting you with his eyes and his passing mechanics to make you think he's going for the lob and then whipping it to the outside, or looking like he's shooting and then lobbing it, that you're constantly just frustrated. The Wolves are excellent, excellent at taking those options away. That said, look, two-man game is lethal and it's a real problem. And the Wolves have defended it well, and they can defend it well. Um, the one thing that is good for them though is they are not going to have to try the rink-a-dink. Let's put a small on Jokic and see how that works. They don't have to do that. They don't have, like, they can put Towns on him and have Rudy weak side if they want to. Towns will pick up foul trouble, but then they'll get by with Nas. There's a lot of options for them to be able to do this. They can also probably switch things up, by the way, and try some possessions with Ant guarding Jokic, Gobert weak side, and then Towns guarding Michael Porter Jr. to get, if Towns gets in foul trouble. Like, that's, Jokic will put Ant back into pick and rolls, but as long as Gobert is able to roam, which he can with Gordon around, you're okay. Like, that's a lot of this too, is with most teams when you do this, it's like, oh, but you're gonna give up, you're giving up an open shooter there if you help off with the big, if the big is roaming. That's the one thing with Denver, is Gordon's not a threat as a corner shooter. If he makes them, you just got to tip your hat and be like, Aaron Gordon hit threes on us. Good night. But that's where a lot of this is going to get to. That's a lot of information to say basically that I have a lot of confidence in the Wolves' ability to cut off a lot of the good looks that Denver creates with their movement.
Yeah. Yeah, to me that last thing you got to was the main thing that I concluded thinking this through, is that to me, as I kind of I go backwards order. I say, okay, here's what I see in the numbers. Now, what's making those numbers happen?
Yep.
Where you are seeing the games and saying, okay, what's happening here? Okay, here's the numbers I go with it. Neither one of those is right or wrong. That's just process. So I was like, okay, what's happening to make the 2 point percentage thing go lower? And I think that's it, is that Rudy roaming, being able to defend Gordon and basically say, okay, you know what? It's not like we're making those Jamal Murray pull-up jumpers any harder or a different percentage. I don't think that's what's happening. I think what's happening is they're taking away the lobs and the layups and the easy stuff at the rim that Denver gets to so easily. And they're saying, you know what, Aaron Gordon, you're shooting threes. Go ahead and shoot the three. We can't cover everywhere. No one can cover the whole court. But like you said, if you hit the threes, you hit the threes. But you're not hitting dunks on us. You're not getting the back cuts and the layups. And to me, Gordon's got to be on the court. Like, they need him defensively and they need him in the 5, and they just need him. He's going to be out there, but his presence being out there is going, like, it gives Minnesota that spot to kind of sag off of, and the defense that's so good anyway, with Gobert being able to roam and cut off and play the angles. That to me was the takeaway. My last question on Denver offense is this. We've seen for 2 decades LeBron James, basketball genius, solve teams over the course of a series.
Yep.
We've seen them, you see what's coming and you slowly solve and figure teams out.
Yeah.
Does Jokic figure Minnesota out? Or, like you kind of said with the Lakers, has just happened, does Minnesota's very good, well-organized defense sort of figure Jokic out in some of those angles? And which direction do you see the figuring out thing going, if that's a story at all?
I think I will lean towards Jokic winning that, and a lot of that is it is in coordination with the coaching staff. What they will do, I would imagine you're going to see this early in the series. I think Jokic is going to shoot a lot of threes. He does this versus dominating huge, incredible rim protectors. He does it versus Davis. He tests them by being like, if I hit 2 or 3 of these, you're going to take a step up. Like, so much of the NBA is about fighting human nature versus the game plan. We have a game plan. Okay, but he hit the shot we wanted him to take. He hit another one. I can't let him hit another one. And then you step up, and that's when he's got you.
You don't want to look stupid. You're a human being that's playing on national TV.
Yeah.
And you don't want to look stupid leaving the guy open.
Yeah. So you go up there and you guard him, and then he hits him. And then people are like, what are you doing? Why aren't you guarding Jokic? So you step up, and then he goes around you. And then you have the worst thing in all of basketball, which is Jokic 5-on-4. You're dead. You're dead at that point. As the series goes along, if Jokic is not shooting in a great clip from three, and is not currently and has not this year, you will see a lot more action running Jokic off of rub screens to get him open. So the counter to Rudy's such a good post defender, the Wolves are really good with their defense when they're in an organized spot, is movement. And it's not just off ball movement, but or weak side movement. It's also they are able to do so many cuts which require you to be like, we have to guard against Murray slipping to the basket, we have to guard against Jokic coming across the lane, and we have to worry about Gordon with the lob or leaving him open and him driving middle. Like there's just all these complicated mechanisms that they're able to run with split action and a number of other things that get them opportunities. What I will tell you is that there will be a lot more as the series goes along of Jokic trying to run off of screens to get the ball on the run and then either shooting or making passes. And the Minnesota's ability to maintain defensive positioning while he is essentially shape-shifting the court is what's going to decide those games. And that's what's going to be really fun, but also really stressful for both teams.
So can we move to Minnesota on offense?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Oh, one last thing. You have in here the Minnesota, the Murray and KCP injury thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
Jamal Murray is going to probably be listed probable or questionable with the calf strain. He's probably going to play. He gets 4 days off. He should be okay to go. I will tell you, like, he was dragging in that game. Like, that hurt. Like, that game was really hard for him. I'm not shocked that he had a great fourth quarter. That's the kind of guy he is. I'm not shocked that he hit that shot. That's the kind of guy he is. But he also was, Austin Reeves really dragged him through the ringer. So whoever they put him on, pay attention, because the Wolves are probably going to want to put him into a lot of actions to make him work. KCP's got an ankle. He should be fine. I'm not worried about KCP's ankle in the series. Although I will say, like, if there's any one guy, I will say this, and we'll get to this in a second. If there's any one guy that might lose minutes in this series, it might surprisingly be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So be cautious of that if you're looking to bet his props, because there have been times when Michael Malone has opted for different looks instead of KCP, and he's such a veteran. There's no he's not going to make a stink about it. It's fine. They trust him. He's great, but there's also be real cautious with KCP props would be my advice. Wolves offense, your thoughts?
Yeah, so the four factors thing on this one, to me, like, it's way more fun to talk about what we just did, the Denver offense, the Minnesota defense. Like, that's the thing everyone's talking about with this matchup. That's what we all want to watch for. To me, what makes or breaks the series for me is that I actually think that Minnesota on offense, this is actually where I think Denver has the edge in the series. This is why I think Denver is going to win the series. And I know I picked Wolves in 6. I'll explain it when we get there. I think Denver's defense has been really good this year and quite underrated. The numbers are really strong. Similar to Denver, Minnesota doesn't get up a ton of threes, so it's going to be a game of twos. We talked about that when Denver has the ball. Minnesota offensively is league average shooting twos. Like, you described their shot diet very well. It's very diverse. They're twos, threes, free throws, everything. Denver's been top 5 2-point defense this season. And I think, too, it's easy to look at the bench and miss Bruce Brown, which I think that they do, and they will, and see what's not there. What is there is, I think, a very good defensive bench. And I think that they can hang defensively, and that especially, like, you didn't name names with the KCP replacement. I had to feel like Peyton Watson's going to see some time in the series and probably some chance on Ant. He's gonna be one of those guys that has to hit some open threes, because Minnesota's going to make sure that he has to prove that he can be out there. But I think Denver's defense can hang. Minnesota, I mentioned before, the free throw thing is going to be a big deal, because obviously Denver needs their starting 5 out there. They don't have a lot of other guys to go to, so you don't want to get in foul trouble. And just free throws, slowing the game down, slowing that pace you talked about, getting some easy stuff. I sort of feel like it's an under sort of series. Like, the way that the defenses both look here, I think points are going to be at a premium. So free throws is a pretty good way to get some points when things are bogged down. EFG wise, Denver is number 3 defensively for this season. You wouldn't think that. They are rated higher defensive EFG than offensive EFG for the season, which is a wild number when you have Jokic on your team. Minnesota's 10th best offensively. So if you look, that's the most important of the 4 factors. This is the biggest mismatch. I don't think Minnesota's offense is bad. I just think they're certainly not great. They might be good. They might be average from a playoff standpoint, probably toward the low end of the spectrum. Denver's defense, I think, is really good. That said, I have a really hard time trying to figure out how the matchup works here and who goes on who. And it's another spot where I found myself being like, man, this really is a problem for Denver. Is I try to think of, okay, who's guarding Towns, who's guarding Gobert? How, that's not how defense works anyways. You're all switching and moving, but Minnesota's size is a real problem. Like, you try to figure that out and you're like, all right, put this guy over here and this guy over here. You move the chess pieces around. You're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm short a man now. Where does this matchup go? I got more size over here. And Denver's big. Denver is not a small team. Another thing too, I wasn't really too worried about DeAndre Jordan and Zeke Naji all season, because who really cares? Aaron Gordon's the backup 5. Guess what? Maybe not in a series when the other team has 3 centers that they can keep playing all game. I don't know if Aaron Gordon is the backup 5 in this matchup. Maybe you'll tell me otherwise. There are real size things here that, like, you and other people told me all season, this is what Minnesota does. And when you actually look granular out of the matches, I'm like, man, the size and the depth stuff really has some advantages for Minnesota, that I do think that they can find some mismatches, but I think they're going to need to find those, because I think Minnesota's offense, of the 4 units, Minnesota's offense to me is the clear weak link of the 4. And if the Wolves don't win the series, I think that would be the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's crazy. We got the defending champs with this incredible offensive player. And yet, if you ranked it, like, what's the best unit on the floor? It's Minnesota's defense. What's the second best unit on the floor? It's Denver's offense. What's the third best unit on the floor? Denver's defense, but it's close. What's the fourth best? It's the Wolves offense by a margin. So
Yeah.
the Wolves have the best unit on the floor, but they have the biggest mismatch as well. And that's what I think makes it really fascinating. And again, it's why, I think an under is a good play. I'm going to, spoiler alert for Friday's best bets, going to be on Nuggets, on Nuggets Wolves under in game 1. One thing I think, with regard to that, is like, that's how Minnesota wants to win this, is tight series, ugly series, physical series, defensive series. Ant makes plays. And what's really kind of curious is they don't necessarily want this to be like, they're not, because this is the problem. This is the problem with Denver, is you can't out clutch them. Ask LA about it. Like, they have the number 2 clutch rating offense, number 2 clutch rating defense. They are insane in clutch time. They are unbelievable on both ends of the floor. They just buckle down, and that level they get to in crunch time is better than anybody's. So Minnesota has to be able to figure out a way to get a lead and hold them off. That's the target here, is get a lead, hold them off when they make the run. A big part of this is going to be defending Anthony Edwards, because here's a little tip for you. They can't. No one can, as I think Ant showed everybody in that first round series. He was so phenomenal. This matchup is really bad for Denver. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, like I said, I think he's a first team all defense level guy this year. That's how disruptive he's been. He's too small. Ant's got too much size, physicality, athleticism. He has a real problem with him. Aaron Gordon is usually their counter there, is, all right, well, KCP can't, we can't handle you with the technique and speed. We'll go to size and physicality. AG's not fast enough. And he just gets blown by. Like, he's just gotten absolutely cooked by him. And so they have to try and, like, go in the middle of a lot of this. You can't put Porter on him, because Porter can't navigate screens. So you can't switch and pick and roll, because now you got Jokic. When they run pick and roll, I will tell you that there was a couple of clips in the MVP piece that I did on Jokic. One of them highlighting his defensive problems was specifically against Anthony Edwards. Ant gets the corner when they play at the level and pick and roll. better than any other player I saw this year on Jokic. He sees Jokic. He sees him trying to contain that edge and pick and roll, playing at the level or in a high drop, and Ant turns a corner every time on him, and it's downhill, and he's off to the races. That's a problem because AG is going to have to be battling with an equally big player for positioning on rebounds. And so if he goes over to help weak side, if Ant turns that corner, even if you force a miss, Towns gets a rebound put back. Gobert gets a rebound put back, depending on who they got assigned to him. Like, this is a real problem for them. Peyton Watson, I think, plays. Christian Brown, I think, plays. I said from the beginning in the last series, the Lakers series is not a Christian Brown series. He struggled with their physicality on the wings last year. It happened again this year. Christian will have a better series this time out. And I think he'll probably see some time on Ant and might do okay. He might get killed because it's Ant. And oh my God, the man's amazing. But he will play a little bit more. Karl Anthony Towns, another huge series for him. He was massive in that first round series. He really punished KD. He needs to be able to do that, and he especially needs to be able to do it in those minutes you're talking about in that second unit.
Yeah.
Because one thing I will be interested to see is whether Finch runs the second. He did this last year. He tried to use the double big and the non-Joker minutes, which makes sense. They don't have any centers besides Joker. So if we get a huge size advantage in the second unit, we can really, put pressure on them. And then when Joker comes back in, we can run with one big for a while. We'll be okay, especially with Nas. I actually kind of think they should do the opposite and just go to Towns and just be like, our one big is better than your no big. And we're gonna space you, and Towns is gonna have all this room to go at Aaron Gordon. That to me is a better strategy, but I'm not Chris Finch, who's a genius, who also is gonna be on a lot of pain pills. So Towns is going to have to be able to, and this is very crucial. It can't just be Towns hits threes in a couple of games. He's got to pressure the rim. He's got to get foul. He's got to get fouls on Gordon. He's got to get offensive rebounds. Towns has to have a physical series. He has to have a physical series. He was physical versus the Suns because they don't have anybody. This is a physical team. And so that's going to be a real pressure point, I think, in terms of this. The other thing I would say is if you look back at the numbers, Mike Conley had phenomenal games versus Denver.
Yep.
And he will probably still continue to have phenomenal games. They will have to put Jamal Murray on Conley at various times. He will probably start on Conley. He might have to move to Jaden later, but for right now, he's going to be guarding him. And running him through all those screens is a really effective way to, one, create space, and two, wear Jamal down. And Conley's very good at understanding how to navigate those pick and rolls. Conley is an extremely smart player. And so he'll understand a lot on both sides of the floor. But I also think Conley's just going to have a lot of opportunities to shoot in this series because the Nuggets, too, like the Wolves, will pack the paint. And they'll dare Conley to hit shots. And in the win that they got to retake the 1 seed before they lost it in the other one, Conley hit a bunch of shots. So I think this is going to be a huge Conley series. That Conley-Jamal matchup is a lot bigger than I think most people would assume when they think like Conley, ancient, Jamal, 30 points on 50, 40, 90 last year, such an explosive. It's closer this year with Jamal's conditioning and injury status. So that's going to be another pressure point, I think, in the series.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I talk about like the chess pieces. You try to move around. You're like, okay, well, let's take Jamal off of Conley then. Let's put KCP on him. He can defend him. Okay. And then so Aaron Gordon goes on Ant. Okay, great. Oh, but now who's Jamal guarding? Because now it's either Jaden, who has a huge size advantage, and can he do something with that? Or it's one of the centers, and you got to hope that they can do something, can get a bucket on Jamal. Like, there's not a way to, like, the whole point of Minnesota's defense is they're all good, and you don't have to hide guys.
Right.
Denver needs to hide guys. And even as we're talking here, you talked about it's not a KCP series, and maybe he's going to lose a few minutes here. It sure sounds to me like it's not really an Aaron Gordon series. We don't really love him on offense because he has a few problems and can hit the shots. And we don't really know if he's the right matchup necessarily on defense. He ain't going anywhere because they have to play him. They have no other options. But like, it's not great if Denver has 5 dudes and it's not a series for 2 of the 5.
So I agree with you, except for this point. Aaron has leveled up to such an incredible degree as a playmaker. to where he actually initiates
Yeah.
actions as a primary point guard. So if you're having the problem of Nickeil Alexander-Walker is living in Jamal Murray's shirt, and you're having the problem of, man, we just keep posting Yoke and we're scoring some, but it's not efficient enough, having Gordon operate as the primary ball handler in pick and rolls, this is one of the things that's insane about Denver. They can run Jokic with Gordon screening or Gordon with Jokic screening and put both of the bigs into that pick and roll action and get them moving and get them out of position. And that's a really effective way to do it, which draws help. And then Gordon's very good about finding guys. So I would just say that I don't like Gordon's scoring opportunities in this series, but
Fair. Yeah, okay.
there are a lot of like this. And no, your question is good because we don't typically tend to think of guys in Gordon's mold in that perspective. That's how he evens it out, is he contributes in these other ways,
Yeah,
particularly
it's
playmaking, which we don't think of as like Aaron Gordon being an
well,
assist
it's the
creator.
Draymond solution. It's when
Yes.
Draymond was getting played off the court in the playoffs, and they're like, well, guess what? He's the point guard now, and we're gonna surround him with shooters. It's that.
So Nuggets regained the 1 seed in the final matchup of the season before they blew it in the Spurs game. Aaron Gordon in that game. How about this? How about this line? 5 points, 5 rebounds, 9 assists in that game.
There's your
Um,
Draymond line.
in the one where the Wolves won, he still had a really good game. Gordon scored 14 points on 5 of 9 shooting, 7 boards, 4 assists. The one before that, he had 11 rebounds in that one, 14 points, 2 assists, but he got outscored by 14 points in his minutes. Like, we're seeing a pattern here where if Gordon is able to create offense with his passing, that helps a lot to even out some of these problems.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some in-game flow stuff before we kind of wrap up with best bets and series leader stuff and stuff like that. So Minnesota notoriously this season was a slow starter. And I made the comment on Twitter and a bunch of Wolves fans really enjoyed it, which is they really are. They're a pack of hunters. They let you get a head start and then they catch up to you. The Minnesota Timberwolves this season had 20 games on the road trailing after the first quarter, but they had the second best straight up win rate in those games on the road after trailing first. They went 12-8 after trailing in the first quarter.
Wow.
That's incredible. Like, if you are down after the first quarter, guess what? You lose most NBA regular season games. Just like one team beat you. But they're not as good at home, interestingly. They're only 10-8 in those situations, but still, if you combine it, that's 22-16 when trailing after the first quarter. They are even better if they get a lead. If they get a lead, good night. If they're leading on the road, 21-3, the fourth best mark in the league this season. They are 8-12 against the spread in spots when leading after the first on road, or when trailing after the first. So they don't cover in the original spread line, but they do come back. So there's live opportunities on them. They are 22nd in clutch offense, and surprisingly, they're also 24th in clutch defense. My point here is the Wolves start slow, catch up like a maniac. Brandon, say hello to your new Golden State third quarter. Take me home, because the Wolves in the third quarter are absolutely sensational. A plus 13.1 net rating. Denver, not nearly as good. They're dominant in first quarters. The game script looks like this. Denver wins the first quarter in the Jokic minutes. The Wolves cut the margin in the second. The Wolves take the lead in the third. The Nuggets come back in the fourth. And then we're in a clutch time where Denver usually wins, which is a big reason why I have Denver -1.5. But my point here is that if Minnesota goes down, one, don't think that your Wolves bet is dead. Two, if this translates from regular season, and we saw this in the Sun series in the games on the road, there's a live bet opportunity on Minnesota. Yeah. Spread is what I would play. I wouldn't do straight up on the road, but even though they win a lot of these games, but you can, especially if they go down big, Minnesota will make a run. They are very consistent and they will catch back up. So I think those points on the kind of the game flow are important for the series for bettors.
Yeah, I had that exact same note. So just the way I was going to frame it as this: in a game where you think you like Denver, bet first quarter. Like if you want Denver in the game, bet them right away in the first quarter. In a game where you want Minnesota, bet them second half or bet them live and bet on the comeback later. So I think that absolutely, like, I had the exact same numbers to pull out here. And it's funny too, the way you describe the game flow is really almost the opposite of the Lakers series that we just
Yep.
watched. And it could be very interesting the way that goes. I think tied to that, like just a few other like game flow and smaller advantage things. We mentioned the clutch thing. You obviously, like, to me, why I come still down to Denver winning the series is I think Minnesota. This is maybe the Minnesota nihilism creeping in a little bit. I've done a really good job keeping it out of this conversation. I think Minnesota loses one game to foul trouble. I think there's just one game where like the cat, especially the young guys, just foul trouble and they get things go away. I also think Minnesota loses at least one game just at clutch time. The thing you just mentioned, where it's back and forth, and Minnesota's offense has not always been great in the fourth quarter when it's close, and Denver just slams the door shut. So those are two big things. Home court, I believe, is huge here. Game 2 and game 5 are on short rest in altitude. So those are spots that you definitely want to pay attention to. However, the thing I can't get past with Minnesota is I really feel like the depth advantage Minnesota has
Huge.
can really play in here. And it might totally offset that altitude thing. It might even flip it. It might even make it, you know what? It's physical. It's a tough series. We're the team, Minnesota, that's got 8-9 dudes that's just going to keep coming at you. You're the team, Denver, that only has 5 guys and is running out of options. So I normally game 2, game 5, short rest, home altitude, the team I like in the series. Normally that's me saying, setting you up for the hammer spot. I'm going to wait in carefully on those because like if I do the player ranking hierarchy, it's not that exciting at the top. Like it's Jokic is the best, Ant and Murray are second and third. I think it's interesting. Is it that order? And how close, which direction is Ant? Is he closer to Jokic? Because if he is in that game, Timberwolves probably won the game. Is he closer to Murray or is Murray not playing that well and a little closer to the rest of the guys? The Rudy, Cat, Gordon, MPJ, Conley, kind of all, whatever order you want in that group. I don't really care. To me, that's a slight tier down. But I worry that Murray might slip into that tier, the way that he is injured right now a little bit, the way that he might be played in the series as a scorer, as a shooter. And then the other thing, too, is after that group, I think Minnesota's got like 4 of the next 5 or 5 of the next 6. Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyle Anderson, if there's a spot for him. Those are guys where, number one, those are the non-Jokic minutes guys. Those are the guys that, like, we're not going to get the Embiid thing, but we've been watching this round. What happened? You get like 4 minutes without Embiid, and it's the community walking back in with the pizza boxes on fire scene. Denver has normally been able to avoid that, but Minnesota in like 4 minutes without Jokic can do a lot of damage there. The other thing, too, is I don't really think for game 1 that the KCP ankle, I don't think the KCP ankle is anything. I think they got the rest. It's fine. I'm not worried for game 1 about Jamal Murray's calf. It's not nothing to me because if those things crop up, Denver is the thinner team with really 5 reliable dudes, 2 of whom we are battling known injuries. If anything comes up there, they're the team that doesn't necessarily have answers. Minnesota has answers. Minnesota has depth. Minnesota has options. Even too, we talk about when you're the coach, when you're setting up, you're asking questions. Who can solve things? Minnesota has more solving options. Denver's not got a lot of answers they can try outside of doing different things with their main guys and Jokic solving things. That's a really good solution, but I can't say I've picked a lot of series based on, well, this team's got Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker as like the 11th and 12th best guys in the series. They sure have a lot of depth there. I just can't. I think that matters here.
It does.
And the physicality, the depth, the little edges. Normally, Denver always wins the little edges thing for me, and then it's just so easy to pick them in a series. I think Minnesota wins the little edges, and the way that the style of the series looks like it's going to play feels like a Minnesota style of series, and that to me is what makes the whole thing so fascinating and makes it so close.
Yeah, I think couple things on that. The Lakers did not do enough in that series to punish the non-Jokic minutes. They just didn't do a good enough job. And you've got to win those. And when Minnesota's lost to the Nuggets, that's been a factor too. The bench scoring advantage in the regular season matchups was ginormous. It was just
Mhm.
huge. Denver doesn't have anybody. And you mentioned the options thing. It's not just for problem solving purposes. It's also in case of emergency. And what I mean by that is like
Yep.
if please God, no injuries. Please, let's give us this one series. Um, if Karl Anthony Towns picks up 2 fouls early, the Wolves are fine. They can
Yeah.
run small with 4 wings and get by. They can put Ant on Aaron Gordon, Jade McDaniels on the perimeter, um, on Murray, put Hyde Conley on Kentavious Caldwell
Or
Pope.
they play Nas too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm kind of getting to is they can go 4 guards. They can go Nas. They can go Rudy with Nas and Ant. They can go Nas with Ant. Like they have a lot of if Jade McDaniels picks up fouls guarding Jamal Murray, no problem. Here comes Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and if you need it, you can run Monte Morris as another point guard next to Mike Conley. They have all these options. Denver, it's like sure hope we got all 5 of the starters. Cause like I'm just gonna tell you, like Reggie, this is the other problem. Reggie Jackson's gonna be a nightmare in this series. Like Reggie was bad. Reggie's been bad. Reggie had a really great November, and I really wish they had carried through. Reggie was terrible the back half of the year. He is banged up and sick and not in the best like he had to burn too many minutes early when Murray missed time. I've seen this a lot. When guys have to burn their minutes early, they don't have enough at the end of the year when they're reserve guards. He doesn't have it. He just doesn't have it. Not great that guy has to play backup point guard minutes and try and score versus units with Rudy Gobert protecting the rim. Like that's not great. And so then the Nuggets fans are like, well, just don't play Reggie. If you don't play a point guard versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are going to rip the ball from you every time, and Anthony Edwards is going to keep punching monster poster highlight dunks. So yeah, like I keep talking about all this and being like, yeah, this is good for Minnesota, and this is good for Minnesota, and this is good for Minnesota. So it's like, why am I on Nuggets -1.5? It's just really comes down to the clutch stuff for me. It's that I don't think Minnesota can get separation, and Denver is unbelievable in these last 5 minutes. I'm a guy that tends to think that most of clutch stuff is pretty noisy. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. These are coin flip games. Denver's too good at it. They have the best 2-man game in the league. Their defenders lock in at an extremely high level. And like you were talking about some of the clutch time stuff. And I'm just like, I want to bet that Anthony Edwards misses a game-winning shot in this series. Because it
Mhm.
just feels like that's gonna happen, where it's like the
Yeah.
moment Ant pull up, got it at the buzzer, just off.
I was watching again, the nihilist fan in me. I was watching for that last series. I was waiting for as everyone was talking about, oh, Ant just pulls up for a bad jumper in KD's face and hits another one. I was waiting for Ant to shoot Minnesota out of the game because
Yeah.
of wanting that matchup and wanting the moment. So that would not surprise me.
All right, let's wrap up with some series leader stuff. Or do you want to? Is there anything more that you want to give
Oh
on
yeah,
this?
well let me. Is that? Do you have anything else to add to your best bet? Then I'll make the case for mine.
Yeah, it really is -1.5 here based off of the fact I think we're gonna get a game 6 with Denver in the lead, and then I will probably hedge. I will see how I will tell you this. I expect Minnesota to win game 1, and so like there will be a better price point on Denver after. Like I will hit Denver immediately if Minnesota hits game 1. I will bet Denver
So
then too.
shouldn't you wait to make that -1.5 bet till after that then?
No, because Denver's also a wagon at home. And if Denver goes up 2-0 in the series, then I'm going to feel really good about having Denver -1.5.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bet the +100 now. If Denver loses at home on Saturday in game 1 or in game 2, I will bet them again. It's not that I don't want to bet the Wolves, it's that I want to bet them game by game in very select spots. And if there's something that changes my mind, yeah, I might pivot. But I will also say this, like, I can't imagine that I'm going to be like, ooh, it's a great buy low opportunity on Minnesota to win the series down 0-2. Nope. If Denver goes 0-2, I'm going to be like, Minnesota's going to make this a series, but this is academic. You're not winning 4 or 5 from Denver. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take Denver -1.5 at +100.
So it's really interesting because I feel like listening to a listener to this podcast, I think listening to everything I've said, you'd be like, okay, so Brandon thinks Denver's going to win the series, and I'm picking the Timberwolves. And listening to everything you've said, I think the listener would be like, okay, Matt thinks the Timberwolves are going to win the series, and you pick the Nuggets. So let me explain the logic of how I get to where I'm at.
Yeah.
I would pick Denver outright to win the series. If I'm just picking a team to win the series, I think Denver wins the series. I think it's tight. I think it's fun. But there are some real red flags. There are real matchup stuff. We talked about all of it. I would put Denver something around like 60-ish% to win the series. It's -190. That means I need 65% or better. And I can't get there. I can't get to Denver wins the series 2 out of 3 times.
Yep.
I only even get to 60-ish% because Denver has home court. And I think that that's really important, especially home court game 7, which I think is the game Denver would be most likely to win in the series of all the options, given the home advantage, given how good they are there, given the experience factor, and just what we know about game 7s historically. So I would pick Denver to win the series on home court, on experience, clutch, best player. They got Jokic. I've seen him do it. That's where I'm at, but I can't get there on the number. Technically speaking, I would show slight value on Minnesota to win the series. Not enough for a thing that I would bet usually. So, okay, where do I go from there? I go to your bet, Denver -1.5, Denver in 6 or less. Okay, I can't do that bet because of what I just said. I want home game 7. If I'm getting Denver, I want the out of getting the game 7 and a chance to get the one win I'm most certain Denver would get out of all the games. I don't want to give that one up because that's how close I think the series is. So I can't do Denver -1.5 because I'm losing that out. So I think it's a long series. So I looked for over 5.5 games. Okay, -165. That's not a very Brandon bet. I'm not big on -165 bets. I do think there's a world where Denver wins in 5. It's not my pick. It's not the most likely outcome, but I think that's how that one busts. So I looked at, okay, well, what if I added that in and the math just got way too crazy? So I'm like, okay, so what have I decided? I've decided that I think the series goes long and I think the Timberwolves are live and the value is more on the Wolves side of the number. I don't think the Timberwolves can win in 7, most likely. I think Denver gets that game. I certainly don't expect the Timberwolves to sweep. I don't really know that Timberwolves in 5 is very likely. So that would mean 4 out of 5. That means a closeout game 5 in Denver on short rest against the champs. I can't quite get there. That left me one option. It is Minnesota in 6. And now here's where the numbers line up. Minnesota to win the series is +175. That's 36% implied. +550 is 15% implied. For Minnesota in 6 to have value, I need them to win the series in 6 42% of the time they win the series. For me, I have them winning in 6 well over half of the time they'd win the series. That's the home game. That's the one shot they get to win a series at home. That's how I got there. It is, to me, a numbers play, even though I technically think that the Nuggets are the slightly better team to win the series. It's a half unit for me. It's +550. And it's also, look, pull back the curtains a little bit. When I make an exacta sort of pick like this, you know this by now, Matt, I'm giving away options and giving away outs to get the better price, not because I'm overconfident that, man, I got this nailed. This is the exact thing. It's because I want to make it worth my while. I'm trying to juice up the odds, knowing that, you know what? Maybe this read doesn't work out for me. It's fine. I got a +550. I can come back in later in the series and add some other options or give myself some other hedges here. So that's the case. Wolves in 6 +550. My best bet, though, is the Jamal Murray series leader. Do you want me to do that one too?
Hit it.
So I kind of got to that one earlier. It's the Jokic scorer versus Jokic assist thing. Just to recap from the season series, Jokic had at least 25 points all 4 games, 33.3 points a game. He had 3, 2, 5, and 7 assists, 4.3 assists per game. potential assists in those games, 6, 7, 14, and 10. Those are low. Those are low numbers for Jokic. He averages 15 potential assists per game. He's 10 or lower all but one of those. And the one that he's over was the one game that Jamal Murray was out, where Reggie Jackson's the point guard. So he's naturally doing more stuff there. So normally, Jokic, 15 potential assists per game, Jamal Murray, 10.5 for the season. In the series we watched in the season, Jokic is at 9.3 potentials per game, way down. That's 50% down from the average. Jamal or Reggie Jackson in the one game was 14 potential assists. Actual assists, 8.3 per game for a Denver starting point guard. Denver starting Jokic, 4.3 per game. So to me, I think this is a great spot to bet on a thing that we bet on this podcast in the finals last year. The way that Miami defended forced Jamal Murray to be a playmaker and get the assists. I look back to make sure in the finals last year, because I know it seems crazy to bet against Jokic assists. 5 games, Jokic had 36 assists. That's 7.2. Jamal Murray had 50. Jamal Murray averaged 10 assists a game in the finals. There is an out here for Denver to play well and have Jokic be more of a playmaker. I think this is very badly mispriced. I don't believe look, you got to count the Wolves guys too, but Ant and Conley are likely the leading assist leaders. They're usually like 5 or 6 a game. They're a more egalitarian team. I don't see that as a huge threat. To me, this is a Jokic Jamal sort of angle. And in particular, I think it's one that Jamal could have a big game or two early. And even if we don't like it later, the number is so far in our favor that we could come back on Jokic if we're ahead later and be able to cover both sides. This is a multi-unit play for me, even at 9-1. I think this is going to be my favorite bet of the entire second round for Jamal Murray, assist leader.
Pretty great. It's pretty great. Look, Jamal is a much better a passer than people give him credit for. He's really learned how to create for people. He's going to run those second units, so he's going to have opportunity to attack in the pick and roll. I like that bet. I'm going to take Mike Conley threes leader, and I'm going to take Nickeil Alexander-Walker threes leader. And this is basically just like, as long as it's not MPJ, I probably win. Nickeil, I think he's going to play a ton in this series. He's a long shot. Like, he's a very long number in this market.
I can tell you the number because I had this as my other bet I wanted to play. So I'm with you on this one. At one book, he is 40-1. He's not even listed at some books. He got up 7.0 attempts per game in 31 minutes in the first round. That was basically the highest from any guy in either team is 8 per game. So volume wise, he's up there. And I agree with you. I think this is a series where he plays a lot. He's going to have the attempts. 40-1 puts you in play of volume wise to hit a few in a series where there's not going to be a ton of threes. So I like this market to attack.
Conley, I think, is also a really good one, especially for this reason. Jokic isn't playing at level in pick and roll coverage as much as he used to. I think it's largely a product of trying to save his body a little bit. It's really taxing to have a big guy shuffling his feet and taking hits and stuff at the angle. And if you play soft drop, like even like a high drop versus Mike Conley, Mike's been doing this for 14 years. Like, Mike's going to take 2 dribbles and he's going to hit a pull up 3. That's what he's going to do. So he's going to have a lot of opportunities here. It's probably MPJ. Like, that's probably who's going to win it. Oh. He's the favorite. There's a good reason to bet that. I don't disagree, but I am willing to take both Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Mike Conley for a half unit to lead the series in threes. Okay. We've hit every possible angle on it. We've covered it all. I've given a great case for the Wolves and bet the Nuggets. You've given a great case for the Nuggets and bet the Wolves. We've given props. We've given all details. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Best bets continuing in the feed. You'll have those tomorrow. Make sure, by the way, shout out. We are starting a new WNBA Buckets feed. So all the WNBA stuff is going to be on its own podcast feed. You can find it wherever you get podcasts. Check it out. Maria Marino, Jim Turvey, Dana will be on there. Jade Money's going to be on there. Lots of folks will be hanging out with on that show. It's great. I will listen to it every single episode. Make sure to check that out. Make sure to go to youtube.com/The Action Network. We've got Action Island on Friday. You can catch me on that show. We were going to do Buckets live on Sunday, maybe Friday night. And we will be with you all the way through. It's been a great first round of coverage. We'll continue it here Follow Brandon in the Action Network app. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, Hutton Jackson, the video crew, getting it up on youtube.com/the Action Network. Enjoy Wolves Nuggets. We'll talk to you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.